so it does not seem worth it to put butter or really any calories in your coffee unless it brings you immense joy.
So what about people putting butter in their coffee? This is a health trend that's been around for probably 5 years, maybe longer now, but at least the 5 years is probably the first time I heard it. Is this something that's healthy to do? Is this something people should be doing? Are we missing out by not putting butter in our coffees?
When you're talking about butter in the coffee like that, it's almost like taking a supplement. Like you're taking this butter because it is healthy, not for the taste, not because it brings joy to your life and you love butter. I love a good butter as well, but just because it's the coffee with the butter is better than the coffee without the butter, and that seems like it is a far overreaching statement. There's obviously a lot of calories in butter, so notwithstanding if this butter or margarine or whatnot has trans fats or healthy fats or omega-3s, just looking at the pure calories, which is 9 per gram of butter, that is a lot of calories, and most individuals in developed countries are consuming too many calories rather than too few. And to me, it does not seem like a good nutrient-dense option. There's better nutrient-dense options to get your omega-3s than butter, and that seems like the main benefit that many people make with butter. So it does not seem worth it to put butter or really any calories in your coffee unless it brings you immense joy.
Yeah, that's one of those things that we talk to people about all the time with weight loss is you want to eliminate liquid calories. And we tend to think of sugar-sweetened beverages, very easy to overconsume those, but you're probably going to have even more calorie density depending on how much butter you're putting in your coffee. And, I enjoy, a pat of butter on, things occasionally, or, butter and pasta sauces and, margarine butter, I honestly couldn't tell a major difference. So, if it has something that's not going to be as, deleterious to my lipid panel, I would probably choose that option. And I do want to make the distinction, a pat of butter, not a stick of butter. I'm not doing a liver king here and sitting down and having 2 sticks of butter for dinner. But again, people talk about the omega-3s, the fat-soluble vitamins that are in butter. Those things are there, but the quantity you would have to consume to get a beneficial, value of that is just going to be, your risk-reward balance is not there. The same thing with there may be a gram of fiber in your donut, and you're supposed to get 30 or 40 grams of fiber, so you could eat 30 or 40 donuts, but at the same time you're getting the fiber, but you're not going to get much nutrition out of that.
Yeah, not an ideal option. Adding other things to coffee, I know there's a trend to add like lion's mane or other various antioxidants or nootropics. That seems much more reasonable, and there's marginal amount of calories in them. So that would be a higher bang for your caloric buck.
Yeah, and it's just the flavor that you're after. You could add a bit of skim milk, low-fat dairy product, and some sugar-free syrup. I know there's a big controversy around artificial sweeteners and gut health, but again, it's probably the dose that's going to make the poison. I know a number of years ago, there was some preclinical models where they fed rats, mice, these inhumane amounts of artificial sweeteners, and then said, look, they get cancer when they do this. And mice are very predisposed to cancer, and for a person to consume that amount, it's just not even feasible.
Yeah. No, that's a good point to make, is at any dose, even water is toxic. One other interesting thing about butter is the more grass that has been consumed for the cow, for the dairy cow making the butter, you can actually have a trans fat, and this is true of most ruminants because of how ruminants metabolize in their stomachs. You can have a healthy trans omega-3 fatty acid. And it's technically a trans fat, but your body can utilize it somewhat unlike other trans fats. So if there's a product that has trans fat on the label, but it is, for example, grass-fed and finished, whether it's meat or whether it is even butter, then that is not necessarily unhealthy for that reason.
Yeah, so this is a different type of trans fat than you get from, let's say, hydrogenated soybean oil, these sort of more artificial processing techniques. You have basically a cow as your processing factory in this case, and that form of trans fat is different. Do we know roughly what percentage of the butter that's making up? Back in the 60s and 70s, I think it was something like maybe 15% of like your margarine butter substitute was actually trans fat, which we found out was not good.
That was not good at all. Yeah, I believe it's the bacteria in one of the ruminant stomachs that changes the conformation from cis to trans, but it's really just an omega-3. And in general, your omega-3s are, they're some of your essential fatty acids, and they're the ones that we have the most difficulty getting in developed countries. That being said, something like a salmon or even like a hemp seed or hemp heart would be a much better source of omega-3s than grass-fed butter.
Yeah, and I think for omega-3s, we can dissect that even a little bit more. When I'm thinking of omega-3s, I tend to think of EPA and DHA, but there's also ALA, which can be converted to some degree to omega-3s. This rate is actually increased in pregnancy, the conversion of ALA to the other omega-3s. But for your average person, eating some walnuts or flaxseed to get your essential omega-3s, you're not going to get a great conversion rate there. So sometimes I think there's some confusion there, and they're like, well, I'm not going to eat fish because I'm taking flaxseed, and that's omega-3.
Yeah.
True, but the components that are studied and found to be beneficial are EPA and DHA. ALA can have some unique benefits. For example, seems to be protective against retinopathy and a couple different disease processes like type 1 diabetes. So it certainly has its place, but just so that people are aware of some of the differences there.
There's a lot of other potentially therapeutic fats and also therapeutic fibers, and we're learning more about these. There's a huge amount of clinical literature that's being released on these various niche fibers and what they do with the gut microbiome and what they do with your insulin sensitivity, and also different fatty acids other than just EPA, DPA, DHA. So as time goes on, this is another notch in the belt of food is medicine.
Yeah, it's another frontier, and you have the microbiome, the gut-brain axis, the estrobolome. It has to do with your hormones. So there's all sorts of things that we're following and we're excited to see come out. But as far as anything to manipulate the estrobolome right now and have a predictable clinical outcome, I don't think we're quite there.
Yeah, even things like nutrigenomics. There's a lag between statistical significance and clinical significance. And you can have one, but you might not necessarily have the other.
Yeah, I think those are great points. And looking at the data and what that actually translates to in humans is very important.